And together we are very proud to present to you and to give you an overview of everything that is part of the FinDock April release. Well, personally, I'm quite excited about this release, and I think we are with the start of new pilots and the first fruits of our efforts around recurring payments. So excited to jump in. From a housekeeping perspective, please know that everything we will be talking about is in the release notes, but also already in your sandbox environments. So you can already test it, play with it, explore the features, and they will be pushed to your production environments on April the 18th, so Sunday evening. In our release, there is there are a couple of items we want to highlight, but very exciting. We want to, as you know, we've concluded major pilots that we have been at run for months and releases last year with giving pages and the API, and we want to start 2 new pilots with this release. And those pilots are mainly focused around recurring payments. So the first one, it has to do with payment collection and the automated collection of payments, so that you don't need to run manual repeated payment schedules, but that we collect automatically for you. And the second has to do, which is a very, for experienced FinDock customers and partners, you know, I think you will recognize it, is we want to improve the data validation and the data quality validation that we do around our payment schedules to make sure we catch errors early. Then, as a third item, we'd like to talk to you about how we improve the payment schedule UI, the layout, and in this case, especially the path. And as normal, there's a bunch of bugs and enhancements, some small, but some even larger, that we are proud of and want to share with you. Before we jump in though, I think to clarify and make sure that we all talk about are on the same page, I want to highlight to you what it means, right? What we call pilot, and then later beta, and then in the end GA or generally available. In pilot, it means that it's our first phase of public testing. So it's a feature, and we are in iteration mode, discovering how it works. If it solves the problem we are trying to solve for you. And that means also that in pilot, we want to closely work with a subset of our customers. Then if we solve the problem, it will move to beta, meaning it's available to everybody and it's working product, but with known limitations. And when also the beta phase has been concluded, then we move to generally available product, where it's fully part of your FinDock license, your product, the product that you have a subscription on, and all features are considered fully functional and fully supported. Now, to give you some context, because I've said it now a couple of times, right? In the last webinar, we also shared that recurring payments is a theme for us. And to iterate and to explain to you how we think about that and what we are doing at the moment, we want to give you some insight in to give you some context in what the typical journey of a recurring payment in FinDock is. So almost all of our customers and all of you are using FinDock for some kind of recurring payment collection, say, for example, direct debit or for credit cards, where you not only take a payment or a donation once, but you take it on a regular interval, normally monthly, for example. And then you can use FinDock, for example, to create either your bank direct debit files or to do, for example, your direct debits via a payment service provider like Go Cardless or Molly, etc. Now, all these recurrings are in your system, and they are either stored as a recurring payment, or you would recognize them as an agreement or as a recurring donation in NPSP. And every time you want to collect, we have a tool for that in FinDock we call the payment schedule. And the payment schedule goes through a set of phases where you select the scope of the payment run or the schedule that you want to do. And then the payment schedule is being processed. And in the case of files, there's also a feedback loop where we present the file to you, and then you need to let us know whether or not the bank has accepted the file and will process for the money. Then asynchronously in the yellow, you can see the bank or the payment service provider gives feedback, right? It says, it worked or it didn't work. And then the installment gets updated and maybe offered for recollection in the next run. And this schedule goes month over month. You do the same steps every iteration, basically. Now, and a lot can go wrong here. I think we have learned in the last years, right, that maybe as you can see on the next slide, is that in the happy path this works, but also in the unhappy path, a lot can go wrong here, and that can be because of data quality issues. That can be because of missing data, and typically it's kind of hard to give clear errors and also to give very specific errors to which records. Now, what we are doing is we looked at all the feedback you have given us in the last year around recurring payments and how to handle and manage recurring payments, and 4 themes have emerged for us that we try to solve. So the first one is what we call is what you see is what you get. So the tool we use for this is a payment schedule, but the UI of that, and also that we actually show what is happening under the hood, could be upgraded. And with this, what we call internally Epic, we want to improve that what you see on the front end and in Salesforce is actually what's happening on the back end, one-to-one. The second one is and we started with this with a pilot, is we want to enable you to automatically take recurring payments. So don't have to run your monthly and payment schedules, create them, run them, process them, but let us do that work for you. And the third one is we want to think about when you have a process and maybe it takes like 2 hours to create this SEPA direct debit file or this BACS file because you have a lot of data. How do you handle data changes in that period? What happens when the customer of your calls and you want to make an adjustment? And the fourth one that we are working on has to do with data quality. How can we let you know if data is valid and catch these errors and these validations, do those early in the process, so you don't have to find out 3 hours in the process that you're missing a payment profile, and then you're wondering, which one of the 2 million records that you're working with. Now, I hope that gives you a bit of insight in what we are working on. And as you can see in this release, we released several items around this, but this will be a theme that will be coming back at least in the 2 releases after as well. So also very keen to get your feedback on it. Now Lawrence will take us into the first feature.
All right, thank you, Stefan. So the first feature that I'd like to talk about is how we improved the payment schedule path, which basically shows you what's happening during running the payment schedule, and then I'll show you what we've built for data validation, and then Stefan will come back to you for payment collection and auto collection. So basically, the payment schedule path is our visual tool to show you what's happening when you're trying to start a collection or when you're running a collection of recurring payments. So we have this payment schedule path with statuses at the top, and we've done several things that we hope make it clearer and more useful and easier for you to run these. So the first thing we did is we've improved the path. So currently, depending on the payment method, certain steps do not make sense, especially so certain steps were just not required when you were integrating with Stripe for a recurring credit card, but they still showed up in the payment schedule path, which was both confusing and unnecessary. And we've changed the path to only show the statuses that are actually valid for a specific payment method and processor combination. And the second we did is improve the detail that you see about what's happening under the hood. Specifically, the process step, which for a lot of payment methods, especially direct debit, runs on what we call the processing hub. we've added a mini tile here that shows you which process is running on the processing hub, and then shows you a deep link to the processing hub manager, where you can see the entire process run in extreme detail, including errors and stuff like that. So that's here in the middle, and if you, for instance, click auto refresh on the top right and show details, you'll see this tile and the details that are contained in it, and it will automatically refresh while the payment schedule process step is running. The second feature that we're working on, and this one's in pilot, is data validation, specifically around a collection of payments. So what we've seen is that currently when you run a payments collection run through a payment schedule, that often, if there's a problem with the data, you'll get that data either when the payment schedule is done, so that could be a few hours if you have a lot of payments to collect, and then you have to go back, find out what's happening, and it's very hard to do. Or when you go to the bank and the file is already generated, and that's basically, well, when you hope everything is correct, right? So you'll find the errors in a very late stage of your collection run, and also the errors that we show are unclear. What we want is that we can prevent errors so that the data in the system is correct before you start with the payment schedule. And it's also easier to, if there's an error, to correct this error. And we've built two things. One is basically a simple description of what data we require to collect a certain payment method that you can use for your data migration before you even start your usage of FinDock in Salesforce, or to build your integrations, and basically answer the question, what data do I need to collect a SEPA direct debit with FinDock? The second is a visual component that works on both the installment and the payment schedule, that shows you in a certain context how valid the current record is. And this is what I'd like to show in the demo, because it's easier to see than to explain. But basically, before I show you, this is what happens. We have a rule set with rules, which is different for each payment processor and payment method. So we also have to implement it for each payment method and process, which we'll do during the pilot. And we started with SEPA direct debit. So we have rules for what data there needs to be for SEPA direct debit. It's basically available in a description, which you can use for migration or to create payment data, and then ends up in for instance, a specific installment. Now, on this installment, there's a component that basically uses this rule set to validate the data and then tell you whether it's correct, yes or no. And if it's not correct, it will hopefully tell you what to correct. And then we validate again to say if it's okay. And the same thing we do on the payment schedule, and then it validates the data on the payment schedule and the underlying related data. So you can correct it before, at the end, you run a payment schedule, hopefully without errors, because that's probably the longest process. So let's see what that looks like. In my environment, I have a payment schedule already set up, and it's already generated installments, which is the data that we want to validate. So here on the right, you'll see a component which is called collection run readiness validation, and which basically checks two things. Is the data on this payment schedule correct? And are the related installments correct? And basically, when I press this button, it's very fast because I only have a few installments, but you can imagine if there's more installments, it takes longer. And then it tells me there is an error with this payment schedule. So basically, the error in this case is there's one installment which has failed validation. But if we click show all results, we'll see that there's lots of things that did go right, which is the data on this payment schedule. So there's a collection date, the collection date is in the future, we have a payment method, the processor, run date, basically everything we need on the payment schedule to run a successful run. Now, when it comes to installments, first we tell you what errors we found. So currently it's only 4 errors that we saw one time because it's only one installment that has a problem. And we show you at least the first 20 installments with errors and the first error. So as you can see, this installment that's related to this payment schedule has a problem. So let's find out.
Lawrence, in the meantime, are you maybe able to zoom your screen a little bit? So
I'm sorry.
Because you're.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Is this better?
Yeah, but can even be one more if you want to.
All right. So here we have an installment that was generated by my payment schedule. And on the right, you see again this collection readiness validation component. And this time, it doesn't validate the payment schedule, but it validates this specific installment against our SEPA rule. So as you can see, this is a installment for direct debit with payment type SEPA with FinDock. And there are several things that we validate. We validate for required fields. In this case, we're talking about a payment profile, which is a required field to collect SEPA direct debit. But we also validate specific things about these fields. So for instance, my component tells me that my bank statement description is too long because a bank statement description can only be 144 characters. So we don't just validate, do we have data, but we also validate, is that data correct? And as you can see here, there's a pretty long list of validations. So we found a mandate, and that mandate was active. And we also found a collection date on the payment schedule, and we have the right status for collection. So we already validated a lot that's correct, but there's still some problems here. So let's start fixing this installment. First, well, important enough is a payment profile. So let's add the payment profile. I think we need payment profile 81 here. Oh, and let's save it. And now my component is revalidated again. And now you can see the payment profile error isn't there yet. Second error, we need a target, and it must be a SEPA target. So let's add a SEPA target here. And now that error is also gone. Now, last error is this bank statement description that's way too long. So let's make it a lot shorter. Let's see if this is, we are now within 144 characters. Yes, and now my validation is successful. So this installment has now been fixed. And we can go back to our payment schedule. And then we simply refresh the page to start the validation again. And now it's successful, which means we can start collecting this payment schedule with a very high chance of success, which I'm going to do by enabling details and auto refresh and start processing. And that's basically it. That's what we built, and which we're quite excited about. So what if you would like to use this? Basically, the first question is, are you using FinDock to collect SEPA direct debit? Because currently we only have rules for this process, and we'll add more during the pilot phase. It's already in your environment, so you can add it to the installment and the payment schedule layout by simply dragging this FinDock data quality component on the layout. And then we hope that you run the validation when you're running your regular payment schedules, and then hopefully you can tell as well. It said it was correct. Well, it said I had a green bar on the validation component, but I had an error later when I sent the file to the bank, or the other way around. It said it was wrong, but the file went through. And then share this feedback with us through email at support@findock.com, mentioning this is pilot feedback. What we're also very, very interested in is that if you already have customization to validate FinDock data before collection, if you would please share that with us through the same path, so we can add that to our validations if it makes sense for all our customers. And that's basically it. So I think it's back to Stefan for auto collection.
Yeah, thanks, Lawrence. I think this is very exciting, right? So for now, it's only SEPA direct debit customers who can make use of this. But obviously, we want to create these rule sets and these validation for all of our payment method and processor combinations, and also make sure that for example, our UK or our Swiss customers can also make use for this. And in the end, it's not only direct debit, right? This also applies to, I don't know, recurring credit card collection via Stripe or Adyen or any payment schedule supported payment method. All right, the next pilot we want to tell you and share you about is also to do with payment collection, but then with the auto collection of payments. So as you all know, currently the collection of payments with FinDock goes via payment schedules, and in the UK also via mandate schedules, and it gives you a lot of fine-grained control that typically enterprises would need, right, in order to create and run the right payment runs. But the downside of that is that it also requires effort, and not once, but every month, every time you make the collection, there is a repeated handling of these payment schedules. Now, this fine-grained control is not always needed for standard use cases, right? And not for all customers. So what we want to do is we want you to be able to collect automatically using our own tools. We want to run the payment schedules for you, significantly reducing the amount of ongoing payment operations you as a customer or a partner need to do for your customers. And we want to do this by every month automatically create the right set of payment schedules for you, and then also automatically run those payment schedules for you. What it looks like for you from a customer perspective is that you only have to put in your initial configuration, and then from then on, we are able to do the collection for you. So when you activate the auto collection pilot features, you need to specify per payment method to us, hey, I want you to auto collect this instead of manual collection. And secondly, we need to set up a pattern, right? Do you collect weekly, daily, monthly, twice a month? You need to input your pattern or your collection rhythm, so to say, which for a lot of customers is every month the same. And once we have inputted, once we said you can collect these payment method automatically, and this is my collection pattern, then we are able to every month or every week or day create the right and relevant payment schedules and execute them for you. Now, obviously, when something goes wrong, so say, for example, you want to collect a card, but the card has expired and the payment service providers gives us feedback and says this is an expired card that needs to be updated, then obviously you need to look at that as a FinDock user, and you want to check and correct these failures. But from a happy path scenario, you only need to manage the exceptions. The regular day-to-day collection of your recurring payments then is automatic. Now this works for any payment method that makes use that we offer via payment schedules. And if you're interested in that, we'd very much get in contact with you. So this is a closed pilot, but when you're interested in making use of these automated collection features, then please fill in the questionnaire that Lawrence also posted a link to in the chat to everybody. Thank you, Lawrence, for that. Or reach out to us, because we are interested in understanding your use cases and working with you to automatically collect your payments for you. And that leaves us to the bugs and enhancements category, right? Where before we jump into it, I wanted to say that it's mainly driven by you, especially the people I now also see in the participant list, right? You share a lot of your feedback and the things that you encounter with FinDock that would improve the product for us, and we try to listen as best as possible. So please feel free to keep on sharing that. And for this release, there's again a list of enhancements that we made for you, which we categorized per FinDock package. So if you're, for example, not using the web hub, then you don't have to look at the web hub. And if you are, for example, a Stripe customer and you're not using Agen, that's fine. But that means that all the changes underneath the Agen heading are not for you. So that also makes it maybe a bit easier for you to understand if there's impact. Now, I'm not going to read through them all, but in general, there's a couple of payment schedule improvements that we made. And we improved and we keep on improving and iterating on the robustness of our guided matching engine to make sure that we are able to handle all kinds of weird edge cases, but also exceptions with as much grace as possible on the Salesforce platform. Now, there's a couple of things I want to highlight to you. And the first one is for guided matching. We know, and we've heard from you, it's hard to restart a transaction once it has a failed rule, for example. So we created a new retry button that you can also put on transaction set. And when you click that, it will retry the underlying transactions that need to be retried from the last rule on. So we hope it's easier for you that in case of a limit exception or some kind of validation error, that you're able to retry a whole bunch of transactions or inbound reports. The second thing I'd like to highlight here is on the processing hub side. As you know, we take data from your Salesforce platform to the processing hub, and then we bring that back later. And in that step back, we always use the bulk API, which is, well, intentionally, right? Because the bulk API is meant for large data volumes and big chunks of data. So we are really happy about it. And it makes sure that even if you're a very large customer, you're able to be successful with our product. The problem is that sometimes we only needed to update 2 records. And then the bulk API, it works, but it's not optimized for smaller amounts of records. So it's slower. So what we've implemented is that depending on the set of data that we need to bring back from processing up to Salesforce, we select either the bulk API or the REST API. Very technical. What this means is we use the right tool for the right job, and it has increased performance for processing for processing of processes. So with our own internal automated testing, for example, we saw an increase of 70% of performance for bringing back data to Salesforce. So we have test files that would normally take 4 minutes. Now they took less than 2. Here's the rest of the other bugs and enhancements upgrades that we made. The last one I'd like to highlight to you is that we now also support box direct debit processing via Stripe. So in the last release, we offered that via GoCardless, and now also via Stripe, giving you a nice array of options when you're a UK-based customer of us that wants to offer direct debits to their customers as payment option and payment method. And with that, I'd like to point out that in detail, all these updates that we've been talking about are in our release notes. So please feel free to go to our docs website and to use it as a reference. In case of questions or feedback, you can simply use the thumbs up button on the right-hand corner, and that will reach us when you have feedback about a specific part of our release notes. Now, before we close, I'd like to, obviously, I'd like to thank you for your attendance, but also wanted to point out that the recording of this release webinar will be posted to our YouTube channel. And if you're not already subscribed, it helps us massively if you subscribe. So please feel free to use this as a reference on YouTube. And also once you're there, please hit the subscribe button to help us out. And with that, thank you for joining the webinar. if there are questions, we will stick around. So feel free to ask them. And if not, then I hope you have a very nice weekend. Thank you.